Alright, welcome back, you filthy exiles. We have something a bit different today. We have patch notes for Harvest League, which will be coming out in about 3.5 days, which is Saturday here in Australia at 5 a.m. in the morning, or 6 a.m. in the morning, so I am pretty psyched. I had a look at these today while I was at work in my lunch break, because that's what you do when Path of Exile patch notes come out. There's a lot of changes. There are good changes, there are bad changes. I'll put the link in the description directly to the patch notes, but also to the keystones, because I guess we'll all want to reference these when we get to that. I'm not going to go through the keystones and try and figure out what they've changed, because it looks like they've added some new stuff in, they've made some changes. Maybe the first one that we'll look at will be Harbinger. Yeah, well, yeah, we might do a video about that. I don't quite know if they've nerfed the the Herald stacking builds. There's nothing. I didn't read anything in the patch notes, but hey, who knows? They might have. So anyway, let's go through this. So obviously they're talking about the harvest changes. We'll just make this a little bigger. Okay. The Harvest Challenge League will be added in. And by the way, this is just going to be a bit of a summary of the key changes that I could see in these notes, just in case you didn't want to read through them all. So obviously the new Harvest League content is going to be added into the game. We're going to be dealing with Oshabi, which is a new Asmeri Mystic. Looks pretty promising and cool, potentially a different direction to go in as well. It's probably going to be more like bloody the Temple of Atsuol sort of stuff, which is pretty cool. Alright, so 40 new challenges, and obviously you'll get footprints at 12, a cloak at 24, and at 36 you'll get a portal, and the usual statue trophy thing. Alright, so major content changes. So obviously we're aware of all the new skill gems that are coming in for Warcries, because this is going to be Warcry and Slam League. General's Cry, that actually looks really cool. You're going to get Mirage Warriors, Intimidating Cry, which is a damage buff by the looks. And reduces the effectiveness of enemy armor. Seismic Cry, Ancestral Cry is going to be pretty cool for slam builds. Penance brands, so they've added a bunch of new brands in. I won't go into great detail here, but there'll be new brands, so that'll open us up to new brand builds. This one here I thought was really cool, Fist of War support. That adds a slam attack, an ancestral slam attack to your slam attacks. So that's going to be really cool, and then that's probably going to combo in with the bloody Ancestral Cry, and that's going to create some crazy ass one. I'm going to put it, there's going to be some crazy motherfuckers building one-shot builds this league, and I reckon it could be doable with these items or these new gems, but we'll see. 14 new uniques, 50 existing uniques that have been rebalanced, and I think they've got the changes further down. 12 new divination cards, it's cool. This is going to be really good because there's some pretty gnarly changes coming into things like, Brain Rattler, which is going to be, you're going to be able to play physical to lightning builds with Slam or Cyclone or whatnot. Minor new content and features. So Screen Shake has been sort of balanced out, and I read through this today, and that's good. Though none of us really use Screen Shake, but if you do, if you like to see the power of your crits, it's more manageable going forwards. It looks like visual effects and improvements have been made to a number of different skills, and even like Arcane Cloak from last league. Even Incinerate's gotten a reskin as well. The Warcries and Taunts Warcries have gotten a bit of a rework as well, which is good. Taunt is actually now a skill that makes sense, or at least an attribute that makes sense that you can see. That's cool. Weapon skins from supporter packs can now be applied to both weapons when dual wielding. That's cool, so you don't have to buy as many bloody weapon skins. Alright, so improved Dragon Fiber, so it's just MTX improvements, audio improvements, it's pretty basic stuff. Delirium is getting folded into the main game. And apparently, according to this, there's a 5% chance for a Mirror of Delirium in areas after the Torch Courts, which is what Act 5, I think that is. So maybe further on. But there's a higher drop rate for cluster jewels, which is, I guess, what we all wanted to know how that would work, because cluster jewels are pretty critical. So that's actually going to be a still an attainable goal to have. It's probably, obviously now a 5% chance as opposed to a 100% chance. There's 95% decrease in the probability of seeing a mirror spawning. But, if we look at it at raw probability, but it's still going to be achievable because you're probably going to get at least one cluster jewel drop from every single mirror that you do based on what they're saying here. They haven't given a percentage here of what they've increased that by, but hey, who cares? As long as we can get them, because there's going to be some builds that are pretty contingent on that. Character balancing. So yeah, no longer any poison immunity based off the God power thing or whatever it is. So that sucks. Hexproof now acts like an immunity effect when gained, similar to Headhunter. So we'll see how that sort of works. This one sucks. Dual wielding no longer grants 20% increased physical attack damage, so that's actually going to decrease the build that I was going for by a little bit, but it won't. It'll be negligible. You'll still get 10% more attack speed and 15% chance to block hits, so that's fine. That won't we'll just basically work around that with the new skill gems, and that's probably what their driver is, to be honest with you. The new skill gems are probably going to level that back out anyway, so that's going to be fine. Skill reworks, obviously war cries have been reworked. War cries no longer have a shared cooldown, so they each have an individual cooldown, so you could potentially run a build with multiple war cries, but there's also a node in the new tree that will share that cooldown. So that'll be really interesting to see how different cooldown reductions work in Helmet and Chance. So I would say there's going to be some pretty Warcry based builds going forwards into the new league, which is going to be really cool to nut that out. I at least want to play one of those this league going forwards. So Abyssal Cry is being converted to Infernal Cry, and basically it's a fire ability that procs explosions based off of fire damage dealt to enemies, based off of 8% of their maximum life. That's pretty fucking cool. It also now gains 1% increased area effect per 1%, so you can get up to 20% area of effect, so that'll be pretty cool. Rallying Cry, yeah, sort of still consistent with how it's been. It's just been sort of, I guess, buffed up. Enduring Cry, enemies to attack the... So Enduring Cry now is a taunt by the looks, so that might actually open taunt builds up to being applicable, and who knows, that might work really well. That's probably going to be a good way to run cast when damage taken chain builds, so cast when damage taken might actually be viable again as an actual applicable skill to kill enemies with, so who knows. Obviously Tectonic Slam, we won't worry too much about Sunder. That one's not critically changed in huge ways. Tectonic Slam is somewhat different now, so you don't consume endurance charges to attack, creating a charge slam. So you only consume an endurance charge every third time you create a fissure. What's the damage base? The damage base of the gem's been increased by 50% as well. Yeah, so the actual overall damage effectiveness has been buffed up significantly, and we'll see the implications of this with the way that they've rebuilt the items as well, because they've dropped the damage bases on a lot of two-hand weapons because they've buffed up the base damage on the actual skills. So they've had to rock a bit of a balancing that way, unfortunately for us. Skill balancing, yeah, that's not really interesting. Slams are obviously being tagged as slam skills now, so they're separate skills, like channeling and whatever skills, attack skills and whatnot. They've apparently increased or improved totem AI. That's good. So potentially ancestral war totems might actually ancestral war totems might be quite good this league with some of the war cries. So that's actually what we might find is chieftain builds, and the old berserker war totem build might actually be worth playing again. Higher levels of that's actually quite a safe build. So Arctic Breath has been converted to Creeping Frost, so that's now been changed. It looks like it's been buffed significantly as well because no one was really playing Arctic Breath. Armageddon brand has been buffed. Its activate time has been reduced, and its damage base has been increased as well, significantly. And added damage effectiveness is up by 10%. Holy fuck, Armageddon brand's actually going to be playable. Lightning Ball has been buffed. Fuck. And the mana cost has been reduced, so Lightning Ball builds are going to be bearable to play. Cyclone, this one's an interesting one. I believe in an earlier patch, in many moons ago, Cyclone was originally like this. You could be stunned while you were channeling. So that's not surprising considering so many people have been playing friggin' Cyclone builds for so many leagues that they would try and decrease the appeal of that. But you know, if you can get stun resistance or immunity, then that's gonna negate that anyway. But that's gonna have to be something, that's gonna be something that's gonna be sort of building the Cyclone builds going forwards, because that'll be quite annoying if you get stunned while you Cyclone. Dual Strike appears to have been buffed. Earthquake is obviously buffed. Fireball has been significantly buffed. Firestorm has been, the min damage has been buffed, and the effectiveness has been buffed. Buff on Freezing Pulse, buff on Frostbolt, buff on Ground Slam, significant buff on Ground Slam. Herald of Purity, they've taken away the ability for it to add physical attack damage to spell and attacks, but they've increased, so they've now grants 9% more physical damage. So for things like running an Abyssus and things like that, Herald of Purity is probably going to be a little less appealing because it doesn't have that base physical damage that it used to add. Herald of Thunder now triggers fewer times, and it looks like it's been nerfed. Yeah, it's been nerfed. So Herald of Thunder builds are not going to be as appealing. Ice Crash no longer does cold damage. It does 100% physical to cold damage, and it looks like its damage effectiveness has been buffed quite considerably as well. So that's going to be good. Ice Trap buffed. Infernal Blow, no massive changes to that, but it does more physical damage to fire now. Lightning Trap buffed. Lightning Spire Trap not buffed. That's been nerfed slightly. Magma Orb has been buffed, and now there's a new chain. There's new chaining with this, and also the unique jewels that go with Magma Orb no longer give you additional projectiles. They give you the ability to chain. That's not projectiles, that's chaining. So that's actually been buffed. Magma Orb has been buffed. Molten Strike has been significantly buffed at the upper end by the looks, not at lower end. Orb of Storm has been slightly nerfed because that is what most crit builds use to proc crit. Perforate, what do we got here? Perforate's been, one could argue that's been nerfed, but now has 2 to 3 added physical attack damage at level 1, so that's a nerf but a buff at the same time, and an increase in the number of spikes that you can create. Okay. Purifying Flame is now much stronger. Stormbrand. Yeah. Well, it looks like they've attacked its damage effectiveness and its detached duration. They haven't really made any massive changes to Stormbrand, so I think Stormbrand builds are pretty safe this league. They weren't like huge drivers last league, but there was still a lot of people playing it. Holy Relic now gives a 5% crit chance. That's pretty cool. Static Strike has been buffed at the lower end, nerfed at the higher end. Oh, but as you're moving, it's 40% less damage irrespective. So you can actually stand still and it's more viable. That'll be interesting to see what people do with that. Wave of Conviction is now buffed. I'm not going to focus on Vow skills because they are what they are. Molten Shell. They've nerfed Molten Shell considerably. Vow Molten Shell. That's the one that's really the only one that we really care about here. So Vow Molten Shell is now less. Oh. Now removes and is removed by other guards. Okay, so you can't have Vow Molten Shell and have Immortal Call, because most people were running that simultaneously. You can only pick one. That sucks. All right, but fair. What else we got here? Support gem changes to Archmage. It looks like they have decreased the lightning damage at the top end and left the low end. Okay, so that's slightly nerfed. Shockwave support, that is buffed significantly, so that's good. Slow projectiles, that is slightly nerfed. Oh no, that looks like it's been buffed. 20% less. Yeah, okay, that's been buffed. Awesome. Alright, so that looks like they've added passive skill tree balance changes, which are these here, which I'll put the link in the description for a shortcut. Ascendancy balance, they haven't really attacked the Ascendancies too much, which is good. They have done a fair bit of work in the Chieftain to make it more appealing with the slam builds. As I would say, a lot of builds are going to be predicated around playing Chieftain builds going forwards. Also Zerka builds. They didn't really need to make any changes to the Duelist tree, because that tree is really good as it is, as far as the Ascendancy goes. And Assassin and things like that are pretty solid, like their crit-based builds and things like that. So I'm sure people will create slam builds with the Assassin tree as well, which would be really interesting to see. Hierophant, they've basically just looked at reforming brands, so it looks like they've given you cooldown reduction on brands and activation frequency abilities in that tree, or more so balance that. Right, so there's a bunch of new lab enchants. There's effect changes on some essence crafts. So this only really this change to notable skills that have been anointed onto amulets will only impact you if you're playing in Standard League, I would say. So new Elder Slayer influence modifiers to several slots. That's going to be pretty interesting. The Hunter influenced ring modifier that grants faster start of energy shield is now instead found on Redeemer influence rings. So that's going to maybe impact a few builds. So if you want that faster start of ES, you're going to want Redeemer items, not Hunter items. So they've just moved that around. So they've reworked a lot of two-handed weapons. On staves, for example, they've increased crit and block to make them more viable. Same with two-handed heavy weapons. It looks like they've looked at increasing AoE, crit, strength, chance to deal double damage, and base damage. So they basically made these more appealing to use because no one was really playing slam builds or EQs and things like that. And when we were playing EQ builds, we were using Hegemony's era for a lot of the, I guess, slam builds previously, because it was just such a viable staff to use and you can max out crit. But now it's actually going to be workable with a lot of the two-handed axes and hammers, which is good. So yeah, baseline axes looks like a lot of crit focus here, and also sundering axes damage over time. Two-handed swords, so accuracy is the name of the game. Looks like they're trying to slow the pace of the game down from some of these changes. So they're increasing crit or crit multi, decreasing attack speeds where applicable, and rebalancing AoE and AoE damage to try and achieve that. Cluster jewels are different, so they've done a lot of balance changes here. So you'll just refer to the actual cluster jewels link. Unique item balances. So this is what I noticed was a big change in a lot of the items. So for example, a lot of early builds used to use Terminus Est, but they've actually now has increased physical. Yeah, so they've actually decreased the base physical damage on a lot of these two-handeds. Kondo's Pride was a ridiculous item with base damage, so they've dropped that. Same with Doomsar is meh, but that'll be good for fire builds because of the default rolls that you get on that. Void Forge is definitely much less appealing. At the top end, it's been decreased 40% of physical damage. Same with Katava's Feast. The Marohi Urki, which is a pretty dope hammer, is actually going to be still pretty viable. Nagamu's Flame's been attacked. Kaom's Primacy's been decreased. Oddly enough, I did notice, the Disintegrator didn't really get attacked very much, so that's still a decent item. Hegemony's Era did cop a bit of a nerf. Yeah, crit strike decrease, so this is going to be less appealing when running slam builds now, but you'll still be able to make it work quite well. Alright, other unique items. They've got a lot of changes here. It would take like 10 years to go through all the changes. They have done a lot of changes to these, a lot of these skills and a lot of these items, which is probably going to make running earlier builds better with some of the changes that they've actually made. The two that I noticed which were really cool is the Ridgewald's Command. So that's actually going to be really good on Zerka builds, and you could probably make that work for Zerka builds where you want to run like slams and things like that, but I reckon these are going to be pretty expensive items based on the bleed and the bleeding per rage, and that's going to be pretty good on Zerka for bleed slam builds. So I would say that's going to be an area to look at if you're going to looking at playing something new. Argyl's Harmony, which was a pretty crappy necklace, that now grants up to 350% increased global critical strike chance from 100. But your crits deal no extra damage. So that's actually a buff but a nerf at the same time. So if there's builds where you've got like cast on crit builds and things like that, that's probably going to be more viable than running it for pure damage, flat crit multi builds. Unitol's Embrace is pretty cool. Now Bone Nova is going to be applicable to any enemies that are bleeding as opposed to enemies that you kill that are bleeding. So you're going to be able to run Bone Nova builds for the first time and run them effectively because that'll be able to drop bosses. So that'll be really interesting. And the Whispering Ice build is going to be quite powerful now. Now you could run a, well actually no, in one way that it's going to be powerful in another. So split personality gems or jewels have been limited to 2. So the old Whispering Ice build is going to be less viable than what it previously was for farming Cyrus. So that's going to be really interesting to see how people work around that. And Wildfire has been changed to causes Molten Strike to fire fewer projectiles, but they now chain an additional time. And Wings of Entropy have been changed as well. It looks like it's actually been buffed so that it's actually a playable item now, as opposed to what it was before, which was, so Wings of Entropy is probably going to be really cool for elemental to chaos conversion or physical to chaos conversion, because of the chaos damage that it does. So that'll be really interesting to see what people do with that. Obviously there's changes to monsters. We won't go into that. Abyss changes. Just looks like it's been streamlined a little bit. Not really worried about betrayal changes. Doesn't look like they've fixed the glitch where it completely desyncs you when you go into a betrayal map, but hey, whatever. Atlas changes. I had a look before, they've changed around the Atlas tiers again, so that's all different again. Zana can now send you on a mission to find and activate a Legion monolith. That'll be really cool. So that's awesome. Looks like Fortune favors the brave, Anarchy, so these will be the mods available with Zana. So Legion, Metamorph, Harbinger, Nemesis, Ambush Breach, Anarchy, and Fortune favors the brave. User interface. They've just done some basic stuff to how you manage your hideout decorations. You can hide, remove only stash tabs now. Stash tab, so this is just quality of life. Okay. Interesting. We're not too worried about this. PvP changes. No one plays PvP, so we don't need to worry about that. Now we've got a list of bug changes here, which are just going to be quality of life, I guess. Recently added. Yeah, okay. So this is just addendums to the changes that they've stated here. Okay, cool. Alright, well, there's a lot of really cool shit. I'm not reading anywhere in here where it's going to say Herald stacking builds are nerfed, but I guess we'll find that out when we start looking at the skills and abilities and whatnot. Anyway, that's the patch notes. I am going to do another video on builds based off of this. If you've watched my other video of builds, which will be applicable in the next league, none of these changes actually impact those builds in any way significantly. Quite frankly, they're all still viable, which solidifies my assertion that irrespective of the patch notes, GGG doesn't put gems or skills in the game that are completely unplayable, and patch for patch, it's not so drastic that it makes those builds unplayable. So yeah, that list that I provided previously still workable, especially for beginner players, and those guides are very comprehensive. Obviously there will be changes in the skill tree, and there'll actually be a little bit more flexibility in order to make those builds more your own builds, as opposed to follow exactly tit for tat the guides that I've put up. Anyway, I'm going to do a second set of guides for some builds for, I guess, more advanced players. And I'm also going to flesh out and do some build guides that are easy to play on PlayStation 4, and they'll be coming up before Saturday, or before the next 3 days are out in the next few nights, to basically give people ideas on what builds you can play. Now, my build that I'm going to go with is actually going to be a lacerate build using twin axes, and regardless of that 20% decrease in DPS, it's a pretty safe build, good for delving, and that's pretty much going to be my starter build for this league. While the new skills and abilities look really cool, there'll be ways that I can apply those into a lacerate build that'll make a lacerate gladiator really good. especially things such as bleed procs and stuff like that. That's going to be really cool to see how that works, and the new war cries. Anyway, if this run through the patch notes was much easier than reading the patch notes, give me a like and sub. Yeah. If you didn't like this video, if you think that I don't know how to read patch notes, dislike the video. And until next time, bye.